is Ringside View with Megha Sharma, and today I pick the topic of how India has been systematically weeding out the Chinese economic tentacles. I take you back to 2020. The world and India had been hit by COVID pandemic. There was an economic meltdown, a complete standstill, and there were a number of companies, banks, mortgage lenders who had been hit hard. HDFC Limited was no exception. In fact, so short of funds was HDFC Limited that it ended up inviting a Chinese company, and not just any Chinese company, it was the Chinese People's Bank that was invited to buy out certain percentage of the shares. There were in total 1.01 crores worth of 1.01 crores shares of HDFC company that were then bought out by the Chinese central bank. This allowed for the Chinese central bank to then end up having owned a 1.01% stake in HDFC. That triggered the government of India for making a number of policy changes, for amending their laws and regulations to stop Chinese FDI to enter into the market. This was a dead diplomacy trap that had been tried and tested by the Chinese when it comes to the Western countries. 2008 subprime crisis is is an example to that, and therefore there were four measures that the government of India put forth, drawing a line saying that these measures are going to be taken against the Chinese company. Number one, FDI restriction. Number two, not allowing Chinese tech companies, Chinese telecom companies to be part of the 5G testing. Number three, booking Chinese companies that refused to pay taxes, that were erring. There were tax evasions by these companies, by these entities. There were financial irregularities by these countries. Number four, substitution of the Chinese imports by Make in India initiative, pushing and stimulating the Indian domestic indigenous companies. I'm going to give you a few figures, and that I don't know if that's going to surprise you, but while we talk about in a very generalistic way that yes, there has been a crackdown on the Chinese companies, we are perhaps not aware of what is the percentage and what is the initiative that has been taken, which is translated to these numbers. Now, the Chinese FDI from 2015 up until 2023, almost a decade, it has reduced to a staggering 98%. Something similar has happened to the FDI coming in from Hong Kong. This has reduced to a staggering 77%. In contrast, the FDI coming in from United States of America has risen to an exceptional 236%, and FDI coming in from Singapore has increased to 157%. So what actions, measures have been taken by the government of India to ensure this happens? Let's take a look at this. And like I said, in 2020, while the government was on an overdrive to formulate an economic stimulus package for the country amidst the COVID that had struck the country, there was an amendment of the FDI policy as well. In terms of the amendment that was made, the government of India decided that there needs to be a ban extended to China as well, where the FDI policy says that countries that are bordering India are not going to be allowed to invite FDI into the country. This ban was already applicable to Bangladesh and India, and now it was then covering China as well. This decision was not taken in good spirit by China. Obviously, like I said, the FDI has reduced to 98%. That is massive business loss for the country. Not to mention the nationalistic agenda of China is also on the downhill. And if you remember, while this action was taken by India in the beginning, in the first quarter of 2020, there was a Galwan clash that took place in May 2020. That led to an increased, so this is a direct impact of the economic crackdown that India has made by the change in the FDI policy of the country, stopping FDI from China. So how does China retaliate? China decides to intrude into our territory along the line of actual control in Ladakh, in Pangong So. In reaction, India has once again taken an aggressive step. What it has done is it has banned 220 of these mobile apps of China. It's called the TikTok and PUBG were amongst those. These apps were stealing and transmitting data to foreign servers. And I'm going to take you back to 2017 as well when the Doklam crisis happened because a similar reaction was shown by the Chinese after India decided to curtail the biggest Chinese investment. This investment was worth $1.3 billion. This was a takeover that the Chinese had suggested, proposed the takeover of India's drug maker. Its name was Gland Pharma. It was to be taken over by Shanghai Fosun Pharma. Remember, the deal was for $1.3 billion, and India shut its doors tight on this Chinese pharma company. What happened after that? There was a Doklam crisis. The war went on for days together after a pushback that was initiated and forced upon by India to China. At the same time, there was a statement that was given by China, obviously, unfortunately, unhappy by the situation that had been created by India, FDI not, the buyout not happening of a $1.8 billion for the Indian pharma company. China goes about saying that its ambassador goes about saying that the action taken by India is violative of the World Trade Organization's non-restrictive policy. And it even asks India to revise its restrictive principle. Obviously, India refused to pay heed to it. And as you saw, the Doklam standoff then was a knee-jerk reaction that China initiated against India. Now, coming back to the FDI amendment of 2020, not allowing FDI from China to then invest in India. There are $2 billion of investments that have been rejected from 2020 up until 2023. There are 16,000 crores rupees from automakers that have been rejected by India. Amongst these are the Great Wall Motors and BYD, whose investment has been rejected by India. There is MG Motors as well that has been doing reasonably well in India. And why it has been doing reasonably well in India? It has decided to Indianize itself. What it means is that it has decided to collaborate and allow for investment to come in from Indian companies into MG Motors. Now, talking about tax evasion and financial irregularities, there has again been a crackdown by the central independent agencies and agency probes that have taken place. There are particularly the Chinese mobile and tech companies that are under the radar. The companies specifically that have been targeted by the Enforcement Directorate are Xiaomi, Oppo, ZTE, OnePlus, Huawei, and Haier. What these companies have been accused of is wrongful royalty payments to proprietary patent holders, violation of FEMA Act. It circumvents the FEMA provision. What it essentially means is that the Chinese entities earning royalties are then funneling these funds into Chinese companies based out of Beijing, which is in violation of the FEMA provision that is provided in our country. There is also information that has been provided by the Ministry of IT and Electronics saying in particular, Oppo, Vivo, Xiaomi have evaded taxes to the tune of almost 15,000 crore rupees. The customs evasion has been of 9,000 crore rupees, GST another 5,000, and there has been a recovery of 1,630 crores that has been thus far done by the central probe agencies. Amidst the other crackdown that has been done by the government of India, the Chinese telecom equipment majors that have been excluded from the 5G testing that took place in 2022, Huawei and ZTE were the two main players who have been refused entry into the 5G testing and bidding. There have been IT raids that have continued against Chinese telecom and tech companies, including Xiaomi, ZTE, OnePlus, Vivo, Oppo. These raids have been happening from 2021 and have continued in 2023 as well. There's more figures to share with you. The Oppo tech company, Oppo mobile company of China, has evaded taxes to the tune of 5,086 crores, which includes customs and GST. Xiaomi has also erred by tax evasion. Uh, there has been 550 crore rupees that have thus far been seized by FEMA under the FEMA Act by Enforcement Directorate from Xiaomi. Xiaomi was making these payments to the Chinese company based out of Beijing, which is Qualcomm and Beijing Xiaomi Software. So the actions that had to be meted out by the Enforcement Directorate. Now, if I also give you more statistics when it comes to the other companies where the Chinese equity stake has reduced to a large extent. Now, Zomato is a company, is an entity which had some amount of Chinese stakes. The company that had put in Chinese stakes into Zomato was Alipay Singapore Holding. It had from 2020, it had a stake of 8.39% in Zomato. It was reduced to a staggering 3.46% by 2023. Paytm had a Chinese entity stake. The Chinese company was Alibaba.com Singapore e-commerce. Its stake reduced from 7.7% in 2020, reduced to 6.6%. There was another Chinese partner by the name of Safe Partners India. It is a Chinese company. It had collaborated. It had a stake in Paytm. It reduced from 5.3% in 2020 to 4.6% in 2023. Policy Bazaar, again an Indian company. It had a stakeholder in Stakeview Capital Mauritius. It's a Chinese company. The stake was reduced from 2.18% from this is in 2020. It has reduced to 1.77%. Similar is the case with the auto firms in our country, the Chinese auto firms in our country. Like I said, there are big companies, big auto giants from China who have been wanting to permeate into the Indian market, but to no avail, because the government of India has made it as a policy decision not to allow for Chinese investment into our auto sector. So amongst the topmost of the Chinese companies that have wanted to penetrate into the Indian market, BYD, its $1 billion plan was rejected by the government. GWM, the plan has been shelved. It had tabled a plan in 2022. It has been shelved since then. I gave you the case in point of MG Motors. MG Motors India has decided to Indianize itself. So the companies that are going to be now investing and buying stakes in MG Motors are M&M, Mahindra and Mahindra, and Sajjan Jindal of the Jindal Corporate. Their sales are going to happen to the tune of 5,000 crore rupees. And not just that, MG Motors has now decided to increase its capacity in the existing plant that is in Halol. This is in Gujarat, which is going to allow for an increase in the number of vehicles that are manufactured in the Halol plant. Not just that, there is another plant that the MG Motor India is then going to be setting up in Halol only in Gujarat. I now put you I give you this information about the telecom networks, how the likes of Huawei and ZTE have not been allowed to participate in the 5G testing. The bidding started off in 2022. There were amendments that were made in the licensing rules, and that's exactly how these Chinese companies, were excluded from the 5G testing. So there had to be an approval from the National Cybersecurity Coordinator. That was a must for any company to enter into the bidding. Chinese companies did not fulfill the criteria for that. So much so that the government of India lost 20% of the 5G testing when the Chinese firms were excluded, but it continued to carry on with the loss that it incurred. I'm also going to put forth to you the certain number of Chinese laws that have triggered a lot of discontentment within the domestic market of China, but particularly, more importantly, the foreign markets from Europe and United States to then ponder longer and contemplate whether they want to set up their plants and firms in China. Now, to give you more information about how the Indra strategy has worked in different sectors when it comes to reducing Chinese investment, number one, the toy imports from China have halved in the last 5 years. The petrochemical domestic production in our country has increased. The laptops and personal computers from China imports have been reduced drastically. The Chinese medical equipment import has been reduced drastically. The cell phone import from China has reduced. The urea and other fertilizers imports from China have also reduced on a large scale. At the same time, what the government is doing, so while we are reducing imports on the other hand, there has to be proactive measures that have to be taken to allow for the Make in India initiative to then burgeoin, to then come to fruition. So there is local manufacturing that is being given impetus, and the impetus happens from the PLIs. The PLIs, which is the product linked incentives, production linked incentives that are being provided by the government of India, allow for more and more companies to then put in tenders, allow for bidding to happen, and let the investments take place with subsidies being given, incentives being given by the government. So in total, there have been 733 PLI applications that the government of India has approved in 14 sectors up until 2023. The government of India expects an investment of 3.65 lakh crore rupees from these 733 applications that have been approved. So it means 733 of these businesses are looking to set up in our country. This also means that up until March 2023 itself, 62,500 crore rupees have already been realized in terms of the expectations of the investments. The production and sales have also been achieved, which are to the tune of 6.75 lakh crore rupees. Jobs creation has been 3.25 lakhs. There has been a boost in exports at 2.56 lakh crores. There's another important factor when it comes to lithium mining, which again puts focus on China because it is the leading lithium manufacturer miner of and this allows it to become play its monopoly in the digital economy. Now, in this regard, there has been a Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill that has been brought forth in 2023 by the Government of India. This allows for the approval process to become easier for lithium mining in our country. And there has been a news pouring in, reports coming in. There have been large amounts of lithium that have been found in different parts of the country. So the lithium mining then is given an impetus. Processes becoming ease of doing business when it comes to lithium mining allows for more and more private players to get into the market, get into the competition. Talking also about semiconductors. Again, a number of semiconductor fabrication plants have been set up in our country. There have been collaborations that have happened from South Korea, from other parts of the world, from United States of America. Plants, in fact, have been set up in Tamil Nadu. There are plants that are being set up in Uttar Pradesh as well. And we keep getting this information through media channels about this. So this is all these developments are taking place with India's semiconductor mission. What the semiconductor mission aims to achieve is it wants to create India to be an electronic manufacturing and design hub for the entire world. There was a Semiconductor India program that was set up in 2021. The aim of this program is to build a semiconductor ecosystem. There were funds to the tune of 76,000 crore rupees that were then invested by the government of India into this. There has been an increased openness by India to allow for US firms to collaborate with the private firms in our country as well. What is expected is that by 2026, the semiconductor demand is likely to surge in our country to $55 billion. There's also, in terms of the statistics, if I provide you that there are estimates being made that the electronic imports are going to outpace the crude oil imports due to the transition of the world from crude to renewable energy. Case in point, in 2023, the crude imports stood at $242 billion, while electronic goods are pinned at $61.1 billion. This is obviously brought in Chinese retaliation because China being the semiconductor hub for the entire world, now other countries, including India, is looking at alternatives and looking domestically to mine lithium reserves. What it has done is that China has exported curbs on chip making metals. China has also blocked. Okay, so these are actionables that have been brought in by the Chinese. Again, looking at all these aspects, the figures, the anecdotes, the certain reports that have poured in for the last 7, 8 years, it's safe to say that India is playing its game uh, seriously and aggressively in a bid to throw out Chinese competition in India, whether it is telecom, whether it's technology, whether it is semiconductors, auto industry, the toys industry, and so on and so forth. Uh, so, what do you talk about when you talk about the India economic blockade on China? The way forward is to continue to explore and take the maximum advantage of the 5G, 6G opportunities that the world provides to India, the quantum computing, robotics and AI, artificial intelligence, signing of FTAs with a number of countries. We've signed it with Australia. Talks are on with Europe, United States, and India. FTAs also at this point of time being talked about and on at in the advanced stages of being signed. There is a lot of talk about IMEC. Which then allows for a corridor to be built to connect India to the Middle East and then to East Europe. This is in the direct counter to what the Chinese have been trying to build, which is the Belt and Road Initiative. It has halted. There have been a number of hiccups because of lack of infrastructure, because of lack of confidence. A number of countries at this point in time are showing amid the Chinese expansionist debt diplomacy formula and program that it practices, whether it is in the Indian subcontinent, ASEAN, or for that matter in Europe or in the United States of America as well. So, amidst all these developments economically that have taken place, we also understand that these military skirmishes, standoffs that take place on the line of actual control in Arunachal, in Doklam, and finally in 2020 in Galwan is in fact a reaction uh, to the economic crackdown that India has done on China. And even as India's economic prowess continues to increase, China is going to find it more and more difficult to allow for these military attacks that it continues to uh, bring forth against India in a bid to poke India, in a bid to needle India unnecessarily. Um, while there is wariness across the globe of how it views China as an economic collaborator, economic partner, these supply chains are now fast shifting to India. India is one of the many countries that is looking to gain. India becoming the only country that is a competitor of China in South, becoming to be the leader of global South, that also reinstates a lot of belief in the world, in the West, about doing business with India. Not to mention, when you become the fifth largest economy, eyeing for the third largest economy goal position, there are obviously going to be opportunities that are going to come your way. There are countries that are going to open up their borders, open up their doors to allow for the FDIs to pour in, to allow for collaborations to take place, to allow for infrastructure investments to take place. So here's the way forward: India growing and finally a crackdown on China that is then going to reduce China into a vassal state in the coming years.